So you should be fine even afterwards if you have any problems. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we begin, I kind of want to make a quick informal poll, just ask very quickly. So last week and the previous week before that, I started sharing with you guys some of my old videos from my previous semesters on English grammar. So I was wondering how you found the quality of those videos, or whether you found it a little bit confusing to watch a video from last semester. As I said previously, since I got sick, it's taken a while to get back. So I started sharing the videos as a sort of transition, so I would be able to be here today. So, but did you find that you liked watching videos more than logging in during class time, or what was your experience like? Did you like waking up and having a video there, or would you rather see me talking to you right now, like during the time of the class? Okay, so while I wait for you to answer that question, I'm going to be pulling up the new material.
I think having I like both of them because we can like ask you questions during the live class, but I like the videos too because we can watch them whenever we can't log on.
Angelique, do you personally like both? So already watching the video or logging in during class time, and you don't mind either? Okay, that's important. Okay, so for those of you who didn't reply, don't worry. There's a poll coming your way where I will ask, what do you like more? Do you like a recording made for you to watch whenever you want? Or do you want to log in with me? I personally like you logging in with me, only because then, we're both held accountable. So it's not that I can just send you a video and expect that you understood whatever I said in that video. And also sometimes it's a little bit awkward because those videos were made for previous classes. So then they have announcements that don't really apply for you guys. So it can be a little bit confusing. So I personally like using the class time to see you, but anyway, you can let me know. You can think about that and your experience, and let me know when I send you that poll. All right, so there are a couple of announcements. First and foremost, the final exam, there's a date that has been shared with us for your final exam, and this one is to take on, it's taking place on December 13th. If I'm not mistaken, I'm just gonna have a quick look again into the list that was sent to us. So your final exam, this is INGL 3205, your section number is 30, and the exam is on the 13th of December, and you have a really crappy time, which is 7:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. In terms of the format, multiple choice, so kind of like the first examination. Maybe there'll be like a couple of essay type questions, but mostly multiple choice. And by this time, I will be uploading all of the PowerPoint slides onto your platform, because I know how stressful final exams are, especially remote. So I know that you guys will be feel very pressured by your own classes de concentración and all that stuff. So I have no problem in giving you everything I can, and also preparing you in terms of incorporating more practice problems for when that time comes, that you feel in a more comfortable position. So hopefully we'll have some time to maybe make Fridays the days that we prepare for this time. And you also have a second examination coming up in 2 weeks. So on the 23rd of November. So your final exam is on the 13th from 7:30 to 10:30 a.m. And your second exam, and I have assistants grading your essays, so you should be done soon with that. So November 23rd, your second exam, and it'll cover the tenses, canonical clauses, and the new material that we're discussing today. That's really easy. You'll see very soon. It's quite easy. So again, it'll be multiple choice, and we'll be taking Fridays from now on and making them the days where we put to practice what we discussed. Kind of like last Friday when I sent off those videos of how to solve problems of the 12 tenses with regular, irregular verbs. All right, so those are the dates to keep in mind. The second exam, November 23rd, and final exam, December 13th. So more on the second exam on the upcoming days, and the final, well, hopefully you won't struggle with the PowerPoint slides that I'll be sending you. All right, so this is recording, which is great. Now we move on to the latest material. So I have it here. I'm just gonna share screen. Can everybody see my screen all right?
Yes. Yes, I see it.
Yes, cool. Thank you, Adriana. All right, so noun clauses is the topic of the day. So you may have remembered from our first week of class when we spoke about grammatical units, unidades gramaticales, and how in the study of English grammar, we talk about a sentence in many different ways. We talk about the components of a sentence. So first and foremost, we talk about clauses, clausula, which are the largest unit of grammatical organization. We said that a clause is basically a complete sentence. Una cláusula es una oración. That clause is composed of a subject and a predicate, okay? And sometimes we have sentences that have more than one clause. These sentences are known as those that have coordinated clauses, right? So we have a clause. Smaller than a clause is a phrase, una frase. We said that a phrase is defined in terms of the head of that phrase. A phrase tiene una cabeza, a head, which is the main component, and everybody else in that phrase exists in that phrase to modify or describe the head. Okay, so we have clause, smaller than a clause, a phrase, smaller than a phrase, a word. So a phrase can be composed of one word, or a phrase can have multiple words. Now, this is different from a clause because we said that a clause has a subject and a verb. So by default, there's more than one word. Versus a phrase can be as small as one word. So in that sense, we can talk about phrases being smaller than a clause. So clause, phrase, word, okay? So a word is smaller than a phrase because we can have phrases with multiple words. But then, you know, we have one word, and then typically when we talk about the word level, we're talking about parts of speech. And we said that parts of speech are ways of categorizing similar categories of words. So nouns, so words that behave the same way in a sentence or serve similar purposes. So nouns describe the agent, whatever, right? Or the receiver. A verb describes the action, event, circumstance. Adjective describes a property of the noun. Adverb describes a property of the verb or how the verb is being conducted. or describes time. We have determinatives, which are almost a bit grammatical units, but they point to a noun or they give us information about a noun. And we have prepositions that give us information about space and time. We have subordinators that serve a grammatical purpose, and they give us information about how clauses relate to one another in a sentence. We have coordinators that join clauses in a sentence and or but, right? And I think that's it. I don't think I think I mentioned all of them. So nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, subordinators, coordinators, and determinatives. 8 parts of speech, right? So then clause, phrase, word, smaller than a word. When we talk about units or organization in English grammar, smaller than a word, morpheme, morphema. When we talk about morphemes, we talk about prefixes and suffixes, so prefijo y sufijo, which have meaning in English grammar. All right, so smaller than is a morpheme, right? So those are the different units of grammatical organization in the study of grammar. But right now, we're going to talk about different types of clauses. So diferentes tipos de cláusulas. So we're at the bit of a larger level. We're at the sentence level, okay? So today we're talking about specifically noun clauses. So just by looking at the label noun clauses, you can assume that noun clauses are perhaps similar or behave similarly to noun phrases. But in this class, we're going to talk about how noun clauses are different from noun phrases. So what is a clause? A clause is a group of words containing a subject and a verb. And we said this and we mentioned this at the beginning of the semester. So a clause tiene un sujeto y un predicado. Sorry. An independent clause, also known as the main clause, is a complete sentence and it contains a main subject and the verb of that sentence. So an independent clause usually is a grammatical full sentence. It can stand on its own. It's meaningful. Okay, so independiente, porque solito comunica significado. No necesita nada más. Está bien solito. So sentences A and B are examples of complete sentences. In other words, those examples are examples of independent clauses. Cláusula independiente. All right, so in our first example, we have the sentence, Sue lives in Tokyo. Sue vive en Tokyo. So that has a subject and a predicate. And because it has a subject and a predicate, it's an independent clause. All right. Where does Sue live? That's another example of an independent clause. Notice how the first example is a declarative sentence versus the second example, which is a question sentence. However, both of them have a subject and a predicate, even though they both express the subject and the predicate differently. The declarative sentence expresses the subject and the predicate with the subject coming first, followed by the predicate. Versus in the question example, we have an auxiliary verb, das, que ocurre, it occurs before a subject, su, and then we have the lexical verb at the end. Nevertheless, they're both examples of independent clauses because they are composed of a subject and a predicate. One moment, I'm gonna just grab a glass of water. All right, so Then we have what is known as a dependent clause. So a dependent clause is different to an independent clause because a dependent clause cannot stand on its own to communicate meaning. What does this mean? Esto significa, this means that on its own, it is not a grammatical sentence, but it needs to be attached to another string of words so that it can be grammatically meaningful, so that it can be grammatical. In this sense, that's why we talk about it as being dependent, dependiente. Another way of talking about a dependent clause is calling it subordinate. Como yo creo que existe la palabra en español, but basically what it means, it's subject to another string of words. So, está sujeto a otro componente en la oración. Otherwise, it is not grammatical. So, a dependent clause depends on a main independent clause, right? So, it needs to be attached to an independent clause in order for it to communicate meaning. So, an example of a dependent clause is the string of words or the combination of words where Sue lives, donde vive Sue. So just by hearing out the string of words out loud, you can think to yourself, hey, this sounds like it's missing something. Where Sue lives, What's the point of that sentence? What are you trying to say? Where Sue lives, Sounds like there's there's a noun missing, or maybe an action or something before it missing that gives me a better idea as to why where Sue lives is relevant. How does it fit into the larger sentence picture? Okay, so where Sue lives is dependent. It needs something else, maybe before it, maybe after it. Okay, because you can have dependent clauses at the end of a sentence or at the beginning. The point of a dependent clause is that it'll always need something else. Siempre va a sonar incompleto. So how do we turn this dependent clause into something that is grammatically meaningful? All right, so you can add maybe an independent clause like the string of words, I know, yo sé. So I know has a subject, I, and the verb or predicate, know. So I know is a full-on sentence. It's a grammatical sentence. It doesn't need anything else. So I know, sujeto predicado, where Sue lives. Suddenly, this is a complete sentence. Where Sue lives is attached to independent clause, I know, y estamos bien. That's a grammatical sentence. So example D is a complete sentence. It has both an independent clause and a dependent clause connected to that independent clause. Where Sue lives is the independent clause. It is also called a noun clause. So we'll be talking about noun clauses very soon. But what you need to know is that not only is this a dependent clause, but it's a specific kind of dependent clause known as noun clauses. There are many different kinds of dependent clauses in English grammar. One of them is called noun clauses, which is today's topic. What is a noun clause and how is it different to a noun phrase, which is something that we spoke about in previous weeks? So if you remember correctly, when we speak about a phrase, we speak about that phrase being organized around one word, and that one word is the head of the phrase. So in this case, a noun phrase has a noun, and the noun determines what can combine with it. So usually in a noun phrase, we have an adjective, maybe combining with the noun, or we have a determinative combining with the noun, or we can even have a, other grammatical components. So a noun phrase is used as a subject or as an object. So not only that, but we also talk about noun phrases in subject position, so in el sujeto, or we can also talk about noun phrases that occur inside of the predicate. So following a transitive verb. También podemos tener un noun phrase en el predicado as an object, all right? So a key distinguishing feature between a noun phrase and a noun clause is that a noun phrase does not contain a verb. En un noun phrase no hay verbo. Okay? Versus a noun clause can contain a verb. It can contain a predicate. Puede tener un predicado, noun clause. All right? So that is the key difference. The key difference is in the packaging of information, the kind of information that we get in each. Can I keep soon? So a noun phrase does not contain a subject and a verb, but a noun clause does contain a subject and the verb. Okay, so we'll see some examples of this very soon. So here are two examples. The first one displays an example of a noun phrase in a sentence. Second one has a noun clause in a sentence. So the first example is, his story was interesting. Su historia fue interesante. Okay, his story has story. Story is a noun. His is a demonstrative. It's a type of determinative that's pointing to the noun. So altogether, his story is a noun phrase that occurs in subject position, como el sujeto, before the verb. What he said was interesting. Lo que él dijo fue interesante. Notice how, even by hearing those string of words, lo que él dijo, we're talking about something. We're talking about a thing. Lo que él dijo. However, we're talking about a thing using more words than required. We're using more words than a noun. We're using a verb, said, to talk about a noun. And not only that, but we're also using a question word. Una palabra de pregunta, what, ¿verdad? ¿Qué? So in this sense, this is a clause. Why? Because it has additional grammatical components that you wouldn't find in a phrase like a question word, what occurs in a dependent clause. And not only that, but it also has a verb. A verb can never occur in a noun phrase. So this is a clause, it's larger than a phrase, okay? It has a subject, it has a predicate. So even though they both fulfill the role or the function of being el sujeto, of being the subject, they both do it differently. One of them fulfills the function of the subject as a phrase or using the packaging of a phrase, and the other one takes the shape of a clause. The same way that we can have a noun phrase and a noun clause in subject position, we can also have these in object position, following the verb. So I heard his story. So his story, noun phrase, now follows the verb. The noun phrase is now in predicate position. I heard what he said. What he said, noun clause, now occurs in object position following the verb. Okay, so we can have noun phrases and noun clauses also in object position. But the main difference lies in the packaging, the word packaging of these two sentences. So not only that, but we can also have a noun clause and a noun phrase acting as the subject to a preposition. Aquí teníamos as the object of a verb, heard, a transitive verb. Here we have noun phrase and noun clause as the object to a preposition, to. So I listened to, so to preposición, listen verb, his story, noun phrase. I listened to, verb, preposition, what he said, noun clause, all right? So a really good clue as to how can we detect a dependent noun clause in una oración, in a sentence, is by looking at whether it has a question word. O sea, what is a question word? A question word is a word that starts with WH, WH. So when, where, what. Those are question words. So typically, if we see a question word in a sentence, that can serve as a hint as to what is to come. And it could be a dependent clause. It could be a noun clause. It could also be an adjective clause, but we're not talking about those today. It could be a noun clause. So let's explore this example of question words and how we can use question words to detect noun clauses. Okay, so look at this table. This table is very useful. It's also part of the latest material that I'll be sharing with you guys on e-courses. Hopefully by the end of this class, I'll get some time to upload these files, including this presentation, so that you don't feel too lost. Okay, so this is from the new material. So noun clauses can begin with question words. I just mentioned that. What, where, when, right? Those are question words. So in this column, we have examples of noun clauses. Everything that is in bold is a noun clause. In this column, we have examples of question sentences. Notice how the author, or our author, makes a distinction between a sentence that has a noun clause versus a question sentence. These two are not the same, and it's important to know, okay? Even though they both have question words, they are not the same. And we'll talk about why they are not the same. How do we tell apart a question sentence versus a sentence that has a noun clause? Here is the answer. It's circled in red. So basically, the main difference between a question sentence and a sentence with a noun clause lies in whether it has the word does, did, and do. Okay? So does, did, and do occurs in a question sentence. It occurs next to a question word. Where does she live? What did he say? When do they arrive? All right, so does, did, do, they're all occurring next to question words. All right, but in a sentence that has a noun clause, we don't have do, no está aquí, anywhere. So I don't know where she lives. So we have the question word where, subject, verb, that's a dependent clause. I couldn't hear what he said. What he said, question word, subject, verb. No hay un do. Do you know when they arrive? When they arrive, question word, subject, verb. But there's no do. How do I make this a question and not a sentence with a noun clause? Vamos a suponer que, see, this one has the do, but the do occurs at the beginning. The do is not occurring next to the question word. If the sentence was, you know, when do they arrive, which by the way is not grammatical, suena como que es súper raro, pero vamos a suponer que esa era la oración. You know when do they arrive? Oof. Anyway, that wouldn't be a sentence with a noun clause, because in that case, the question word is immediately followed by a does, did, and do. Suddenly, it would be a question sentence, but not a sentence with a noun clause. Okay, does that make sense? So basically, your question word needs to occur next to your subject and predicate for it to be a noun clause. Otherwise, if your question word occurs next to does, did, and do, then it's a question and not a noun clause. Okay. So the word order is the same in both for the question and the noun clause, because who is the subject in both. So I don't know who lives there. Who lives there? Please tell me what happened. What happened? I wonder who is at the door. Who is at the door? So she is the subject of the question. So in a question, sorry. Okay, this is interesting because it's talking about the difference in composition in word order. So In G, she is the subject of the question. Who, she, sujeto. However, when we're talking about a question that involves the verb is, also we're talking about be, so be, is, are, becoming, right? Who she is, aquí, she is in subject position, is in predicate position. But if we were to turn this into a question, we would have the inverse order. So who is she? Okay, so be now is in first position and our subject is in final position. Okay, so when we are involving the verb be, we have a shift in word order. So I don't know who those men are. Who question word, those men in subject position are verb. So eso sigue el sujeto y predicado. Ese orden que siempre vemos en las cláusulas de subject and predicate. However, in a question with be, that order is reversed. So we have the predicate first and then the subject. So who are the verb, those men is the subject. I wonder whose house that is. So aquí, this is a sentence with a noun clause because it's following that word order that we know of subject, house, is, predicado, but in this column, the order is reversed. Question word, house, is that? Although we have the subject here and the verb following it, that, which is a part of the subject, is in final position, okay? So the key difference in this line lies in word order so that we can distinguish the difference between what counts as a noun clause and what counts as a question. We have to look at word order. We have to look at whether it has, does, did, and do. In example J, we're looking at the segments in bold. What she said is the subject of the sentence. Okay, so what she said, sujeto, surprised me. Notice that in K, what they should do, a noun clause subject takes a singular verb, is obvious. So it's interesting, this particular example, because we're talking about un sujeto que es plural, they. But even though they is plural, our verb, no, what they should do, are obvious. Because we're not talking about necessarily they, we're talking about an action of something they should do, which in this case could be singular. So it is. So that's an interesting example. Anyway, so that's that. So these exercises, I'm gonna suggest that you complete them by Friday. So similar to last Friday when I asked you to submit exercises, I'm gonna ask you to submit exercises in relation to detecting noun clauses. On Friday as well, I'm gonna be making a practice class so that can serve as guide for the homework. So you'll have until 5 p.m. on Friday to submit that. And I will be uploading these slides and the latest chapter right after we finish today. So those are the announcements for today. You have homework for Friday and your next test is on the 23rd and your final exam is on December 13th from 7:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. And your essays are being graded this week. So are there any other additional questions or concerns? Any questions or concerns? No?
Those exercises are
Okay, so if
from
there are no
the
additional questions or concerns, always feel free to email me. I've actually been better at responding to emails than WhatsApp messages because for some reason I've been getting a lot of WhatsApp messages lately. So I suggest now that, you know, it's best that if you want to like directly reach me, go and send me an email. Okay? Anyway, so I hope you have a good day. I'll be uploading this class and all content, so watch out for a follow-up email today. Okay? Thank you so much for tuning in and being patient. All right, so have a nice day.